Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Selena from Wholeness Campaign, and today I want to give you an update as to where I'm at on my whole GAPS healing journey. I know I've done other videos here in the past where I've shared the whole host of things that went away pretty quickly within those first couple of years on GAPS, but now we're heading on to about 2.5 years of being on the GAPS diet. I have somewhat weaned off, and I want to share a little bit of my process with that, as well as where we're at now, where my husband's at now, and what we're kind of doing going forward with food. So let's jump in. I feel like I got a lot of questions about this whole idea of how long being on the GAPS diet, how long have I been on it, how long do I expect to be on it? People are always asking me, when are you going to be off? And it's just such a funny question to me because I actually really enjoy my diet and I feel so good. So I'm like not really counting down the days. If anything, I'm just like, how can I keep this a part of my lifestyle for more of a long-term thing? Honestly, most people kind of view diets like this or protocols like this as restriction, and so I kind of understand that. But either way, I'm not really looking at it as I'm being restricted to having to eat GAPS foods only. I'm looking at it like I'm healing my body and I'm giving my body what it needs, and I'm just going to let myself go at my own pace. I don't feel like I need to rush the process. I really want to hone in on the craft of making nourishing foods and make that my lifestyle, especially before I go and adding tons and tons of new things back in. But that being said, I have kind of weaned slightly off of GAPS, and I've gone back and forth with pregnancy, so I'm going to share like all of that. And then my husband has had some different health stuff come up, which I'm not going to go too deep into, but it's caused me to kind of reevaluate and probably choose into being on GAPS for a little bit longer than we were expecting. But we are excited because we're looking forward to the kinds of healing and finding new and fresh ways to keep this food and these old traditions alive in our household. So I was really strict for 2 years. My husband and I did the introduction diet for about 3 to 4 months. I think it took us to kind of get through everything. And he was very strict at that point. Both of us were very much on board. I knew that I wasn't sure if he was going to stay on it for the entirety of the time that I would be on it, because he didn't have as many urgent issues. He definitely had things that could be healed, but he didn't have as many urgent things, and he loves his food. So what ended up happening was probably about a year in, he really started doing more of like an 80-20. And so he did get some really good healing, but he definitely didn't stick out GAPS for the entirety of it. I was definitely more the strict one. And that being said, about a year and 8 months into it, maybe it was 2 years, was where I started trying out sourdough bread. And I found that I had about a limit. Like I could definitely do it if it was like well made from home, from scratch, sourdough bread, fermented properly, all of that. I could definitely do it and I could handle it in ways that I could not probably have handled coming off before. But I definitely had a threshold. So like I couldn't just like eat sourdough bread all day long, or else I would start to feel symptoms, which maybe isn't really the goal anyway, but that's what I would experience. Now flash forward, I got pregnant. It was about 2 years and 2 months into being on GAPS. And at that point I had probably introduced the sourdough bread. I could do well with some. I had introduced certain kinds of like sweet potatoes. I would have potatoes every once in a while. But then when I got pregnant and during that first trimester, it really did kind of take me through a loop. So in the beginning, I really couldn't have any fiber at all, which was really different for me. I definitely was somebody who's more sensitive to fiber, but there were weeks where I actually chose to go no plant GAPS, and I did so well in that early pregnancy, which is very weird. And again, I've never really been like that, but my body was so sensitive to fiber, to vegetables, to fruit, really to anything where I could potentially be feeding any kind of yeast. Yeast can overgrow in pregnancy. And I noticed that my threshold for having sourdough bread occasionally died down dramatically. Like I wasn't able to really have any bread whatsoever. And before, I was even able to sometimes have the occasional non-sourdough bread. My body was actually doing really well. So pregnancy, that first trimester was very challenging. There was times I craved fruit and that was all I ate, but then I would react a lot to that fiber. So this was also a really hard trimester for me because I didn't tolerate meat stock. That was something that was so new because for the last 2 years before that, I was having like tons of meat stock, probably like at that point I built up to like a quart a day at least. It was just, I was having a ton of meat stock, and then dramatically it started, like all of a sudden, really dramatically, it just cut down completely, and I couldn't even bear the smell of it. A lot of people in pregnancy actually crave those stocks and broths, and I just literally made me want to throw up every single time I smelled it. So I couldn't even make it in my house. And every time I heated it up, I would actually just start gagging. So I was like, try and take little spoonfuls of it for some time, but then I was listening to my body. I'm like, I'm not going to try to make myself gag right now. The same thing kind of happened with liver. If I tasted it at all, it was terrible, which is like the stuff you're supposed to have. I drank a ton of raw milk during that time and just tried to kind of like do what worked. But once I got into my second trimester, I definitely felt like things got kind of back to normal, back to where I was before, and actually got better. Like I noticed that I could tolerate, my tolerance for the things that before pregnancy would cause issues had really increased dramatically. And I don't know if it's just that my body was craving more carbs or whatnot, but sweet potato and fermented rice, different more like starchy things that aren't necessarily like bad. They're like vegetables, root vegetables that aren't like terrible for you, but they're not GAPS approved. I was able to have a lot of those. So I remember doing some buckwheat, and I did go off. There was like several times where I went off completely and had a meal at a restaurant. Sometimes it went well, sometimes it didn't go well, but there was a lot. It was like hard to find foods that would actually like sit well with me for a time. So we did what worked. Once I was able to kind of get back on the meat stock bandwagon and the liver train, I don't know why they're vehicles, but I felt so much better. I was really glad because I knew that this is what I need to be eating to be fueling this growing baby. And yeah, it's just where I was at in that kind of season. Now, my husband is in a place where he's kind of ready to commit to a little bit longer term healing. And so we are probably going to stay on GAPS or like full GAPS for a little bit longer. I've never fully hit the 6-month mark of having no symptoms, because when I got pregnant, that was like right in between that time, and then all my food things just went kind of crazy. But I really would like to get to that 6-month mark of not having any symptoms related to any of the things that I had before, and I think this will actually give me the opportunity to do that at some point. So we are heading back on the full GAPS direction after kind of a crazy beginning of pregnancy, mostly for my husband's sake, and I think it'll be really good for his mental health, different kinds of health issues that he's still resolving. And ultimately, when this baby's born, they will be starting out on baby GAPS anyway. Most of the GAPS things are staples in our house at this point anyway, so it's not really that challenging to kind of switch out grains for other alternatives. We've kind of run the gamut here. So I'm not sure how strictly I'm going to hold to GAPS during this pregnancy, but I know that I would like to see that 6-month mark once I get off of being pregnant. I might feel differently once I have a baby, once everything, but if most of my meals that I'm cooking around the house are for him anyway, then we're probably are going to kind of stick to full GAPS. My body does really well with full GAPS. I honestly just thrived as I was on it, and symptoms were just going away and going away and going away. So I'm all right to kind of hang on this, and if there's any reason why this baby might need GAPS at any point, I would love to be able to be prepared for that. I'm definitely not somebody who thinks you need to be on the GAPS diet for the rest of your life. My goal really is to move to a more nourishing traditions, Weston A. Price style diet as I can, but at this point my family's kind of moving as a unit, and so we are going with who needs it most, and we're making it work. And so this is just kind of an update. A lot of people wonder, if somebody's going to be on GAPS forever, and I'm definitely not, but I am passionate about the healing journey and giving your body what it needs, when it needs it. So if you got anything valuable out of this video, please like and subscribe to my channel to follow along my healing process, my family's healing process, and to learn more all about what the GAPS diet is, how to heal emotionally, how to really go deep into these different detox things. It is my passion to walk alongside people as they heal and grow. It inspires me and hopefully brings encouragement to you. Thanks for watching.